Most people don't fail because they're stupid. They fail because they react. They react emotionally. They react impulsively. They react without control. This audiobook is not about motivation. It's not about feeling good. It's about control. Control over your emotions. Control over your reactions. Control over your internal world. Because the truth is simple. If you do not master your emotions will master you. And you will stay average. Listen carefully. This will change how you think, decide, and move. Chapter 1. Emotional reactions are the enemy. Let's say this clearly, without comfort, without softness. Your biggest enemy is not your lack of talent. It is not your background. It is not other people. Your biggest enemy is your emotional reaction. That's the key. Every major mistake you regret started the same way. A reaction. A moment where emotion took the wheel and logic left the room. A text you shouldn't have sent. A message written in anger. A decision made while frustrated. Words spoken too fast, too loud, too honestly. And once they're out, they're out. You can't take them back. You can't edit them. You can't undo the damage. That's not bad luck. That's lack of control. You have a choice. Always. Most people don't see it because they react too fast to notice. They feel something and immediately act on it. Anger becomes words. Fear becomes avoidance. Ego becomes confrontation. Reaction feels natural. Reaction feels justified. Reaction feels human. And that's exactly why it keeps you average. High performers understand something average people don't want to hear. Emotion is expensive. Every reaction costs you leverage. Every outburst costs you respect. Every impulsive decision costs you time. Reaction equals loss. Say it again. Reaction equals loss. That's not philosophy. That's reality. Look at any situation where power matters. Work. Relationships. Negotiations. Conflict. The person who reacts first loses. The calm one wins. Always. High performers pause. Average people explode. That pause is everything. In that pause, there is choice. In that pause, there is control. In that pause, you decide who you are going to be. You have a choice. Most people never pause. They live on autopilot. Stimulus. Reaction. Stimulus. Reaction. Someone disrespects them. They snap. Something goes wrong. They panic. They feel ignored. They over-explain. They feel threatened. They attack. And then they wonder why their life feels chaotic. It's not about bad circumstances. It's about bad responses. It's not about what happens to you. It's about how fast you react to it. That's the key. Let's talk about the real-world difference between those who rise and those who stay stuck. Look at a workplace under pressure. Deadlines are tight. Mistakes happen. Clients complain. The average employee reacts emotionally. They complain. They blame. They panic. They talk too much. Their emotions are visible. Their stress leaks into their words. Their insecurity shows in their tone. Now look at the calm leader. Same pressure. Same problems. Same chaos. But no reaction. They slow down. They ask fewer questions. They speak less, but with precision. They don't rush to defend themselves. Why? Because they understand something simple. You don't need their permission to stay calm. That's the difference. The calm leader is not calmer by nature. They are calmer by discipline. It's not about personality. It's about training. Most people think emotional control means suppressing feelings. That's wrong. You're not here to pretend you don't feel. You're here to stop letting feelings decide for you. Feel the emotion. Do not obey it. That's the rule. Anger will visit you. Fear will show up. Ego will demand attention. You don't need to fight them. You don't need to express them. You need to delay. Delay is power. A delayed response is a controlled response. A controlled response is a strategic response. You have a choice. When you feel the urge to react, your job is not to act. Your job is to pause. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 1 minute. That pause feels uncomfortable. Good. Discomfort is the price of control. Average people trade control for comfort. High performers do the opposite. That's the key. Let's make this practical. The next time you feel triggered, do nothing. No message. No reply. No explanation. Just observe. Say this internally. I feel the emotion. I don't follow it. Repeat it. You don't need their permission to stay silent. You don't need their approval to stay composed. You don't need to win the moment. You need to win the long game. Every time you don't react, you build something. You build restraint. You build authority. You build self-respect. And something else happens. People notice. They may not say it, but they feel it. Your calm makes others uncomfortable, because calm signals strength, and strength shifts power. That's why emotional people try to provoke calm people. They want you to come down to their level. They want you reactive. Don't give them that. You have a choice. Most people think reacting makes them strong. It doesn't. It exposes weakness. Strength is restraint. Strength is silence. Strength is staying in control when everything inside you wants to explode. That's the discipline. And discipline is not built in big moments. It's built in small ones. The ignored message. The rude comment. The unfair situation. Every small non-reaction is a rep. And reps build mastery. Reaction equals loss. Pause equals power. Say it again. Reaction equals loss. Pause equals power. This chapter is not asking you to be passive. It's asking you to be precise. There is a time to speak. There is a time to act. But that time is never dictated by emotion. It's dictated by strategy. And strategy requires calm. You master this lesson, and everything changes. Your decisions improve. Your relationships shift. Your presence becomes heavier. Because people can sense when you are no longer controllable. You don't need their permission to be disciplined. You don't need their permission to be calm. You have a choice. You just learned why emotional reactions are the enemy. Now it's time to understand the behavior that keeps most people trapped in weakness. You learned to pause. Now let's talk about what average people do instead. Chapter 2. Average people vent, elite minds observe. Let's start with a hard truth most people don't want to hear. Venting feels good, but it makes you weak. That's the key. Average people vent. They talk. They complain. They explain their emotions to anyone who will listen. Elite minds do something very different. They observe. They feel the emotion. They register it. And then they step back. You have a choice. Venting feels productive, but it isn't. It feels like release, but it's actually reinforcement. Every time you vent, you teach your brain one thing. Whenever I feel uncomfortable, I must express it. That's not strength. That's conditioning. And conditioning shapes identity. Most people vent because they believe emotions must be released to disappear. That's false. Emotions don't disappear when you talk about them. They get rehearsed. Every complaint is a repetition. Every rant is a rehearsal. Every emotional explanation deepens the groove. That's why people who vent a lot stay stuck in the same problems for years. Same job complaints. Same relationship frustrations. Same emotional loops. It's not about bad luck. It's about bad habits. It's not about expression. It's about discipline. Elite minds understand something simple. What you feed grows. Feed anger with words, it grows. Feed frustration with stories, it grows. Feed victimhood with explanations, it grows. Observation starves emotion. Venting feeds it. That's the difference. You have a choice. When something triggers you, you can either talk about it, or you can study it. Elite minds ask different questions. They don't ask, "Why does this keep happening to me?" They ask, "Why did this trigger me?" That's the key. Observation turns emotion into information. Venting turns emotion into identity. Let's make this real. Think about the workplace again. An average employee gets criticized. They immediately vent to coworkers. They complain about unfairness. They justify themselves. They replay the moment over and over. What happens? The emotion stays alive. The frustration deepens. The identity becomes, "I'm not respected." Now look at the elite performer. Same criticism. Same tone. Same situation. No venting. They go quiet. They replay the situation privately. They observe their reaction. Why did that bother me? Was there truth in it? What can I control here? They don't need emotional release. They need clarity. You don't need their permission to stay quiet. You don't need their validation to process internally. That's discipline. Most people confuse venting with honesty. They think, "I'm just being real." No, you're being reactive. Honesty without control is chaos. Honesty with discipline is power. That's the difference. Elite minds are not emotionally numb. They're emotionally literate. They know exactly what they're feeling. They just don't let it leak everywhere. They don't narrate their emotions in real time. They don't explain themselves to feel better. They observe. And observation creates distance. Distance creates control. That's the key. Here's a rule you need to internalize. If you feel the urge to vent, that's the moment you should stay silent. That urge is not a signal to speak. It's a signal to pause. You have a choice. When emotion spikes, say this internally. "I don't need to express this to understand it." Repeat it. You don't need their permission to process internally. You don't need an audience for your emotions. Most people vent because they want agreement. They want someone to say, "You're right." That's validation seeking. And validation weakens you. Because the moment you need agreement, you give away control. It's not about being understood. It's about being grounded. Elite minds ground themselves before they speak. Average people speak to ground themselves. That's the difference. Let's talk about relationships. Average people vent to friends about their partner. They complain. They exaggerate. They collect emotional allies. What happens? Resentment grows. Bias forms. The problem becomes permanent. Elite minds do not recruit emotional support for temporary feelings. They wait. They observe. They let emotions settle before speaking. Why? Because clarity comes after calm. Never before. That's the key. Observation does something venting never can. It reveals patterns. When you observe instead of vent, you start seeing yourself clearly. Your triggers. Your insecurities. Your ego. And that's uncomfortable. That's why most people avoid it. Venting feels good. Observation feels honest. You have a choice. Here's a practical discipline you must start using immediately. The 24-hour rule. When something upsets you, you wait 24 hours before talking about it. No venting. No explaining. No emotional storytelling. Just observation. By the time 24 hours pass, one of two things will happen. The emotion will lose intensity, or clarity will emerge. Either way, you win. Reaction equals loss. Observation equals leverage. Say it again. Reaction equals loss. Observation equals leverage. This doesn't mean you never speak. It means you speak after you're calm, after you're clear, after you're in control. Elite minds choose timing over relief. That's discipline. And discipline compounds. The more you observe, the less reactive you become. The less reactive you become, the more powerful you feel. The more powerful you feel, the less you need to vent. It's a loop. A powerful one. You don't need their permission to break the habit of venting. You don't need their approval to be emotionally contained. You have a choice. This chapter taught you to stop feeding emotion with words, to stop rehearsing frustration, to stop outsourcing your emotional processing. You learned to observe. And observation leads to something even more powerful. Silence. You paused your reactions. You stopped venting. Now it's time to understand why silence itself is a weapon. Chapter 3. Silence is a weapon, not a weakness. Let's be honest. Most people think silence is weakness. Most people believe that if you're not talking, you're losing. That's wrong. That's the trap. Silence is not the absence of power. Silence is the presence of control. And control is the only currency that matters when it comes to dominance, influence, and personal mastery. That's the key. Think about it. How often have you said something you immediately regretted? How often have words escalated a situation instead of fixing it? The average person reacts instantly, fills the air with excuses, explanations, and anger. And in that moment, they are weak. You have a choice. The elite, the high performers, the quiet achievers, they do not rush to speak. They do not announce their plans. They do not explain themselves to anyone. They observe. They calculate. They wait. Silence is a strategy. Silence creates leverage. Silence makes people underestimate you, and that is your advantage. Let's break it down. First, silence allows you to hear what others are really saying. Most people talk to talk. They fill the air with noise because they want to be heard. They are distracted by their own voices. You, however, stay silent. You listen. You observe. You pick up on the weaknesses, the lies, the inconsistencies. And that information gives you power. Second, silence is disarming. When someone expects a reaction, and you give none, they feel off balance. They expect chaos, they get composure. They expect argument, they get stillness. That stillness communicates one thing: I am not reactive. I am in control. No words can match that force. Third, silence is protection. Every word you speak is ammunition. Every sentence you utter can be twisted, misinterpreted, or weaponized. By staying silent until necessary, you protect your energy, your reputation, and your influence. You conserve power. You choose your moments. That's the repetition you need to hear. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strength. Silence is power. You have a choice. Think about conflict. How do most people react? They argue. They shout. They try to win immediately. They vent. They panic. They escalate. Now imagine this, the same situation, but you remain silent. You nod. You listen. You observe. You speak only once, clearly, deliberately, when the time is right. Everything you say carries weight because it is scarce. Everything you say carries authority because it is calculated. That's the key difference between noise and influence. Silence also teaches patience. Most people cannot wait. They cannot delay gratification. They cannot hold their tongue. But silence forces you to wait. Silence forces you to pause. And in that pause, you find clarity. You find a strategy. You find yourself. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you train yourself. Every time you resist the urge to speak, you strengthen control. Every time you let words go unspoken, you reinforce the habit that makes you elite. You have a choice. Let's make this practical. Next time someone tries to provoke you, don't reply immediately. Don't justify. Don't explain. Don't argue. Pause. Breathe. Observe. And if you do speak, make it precise. Make it meaningful. Make it deliberate. That's the power of silence. Another way silence works as a weapon is through anticipation. When you stay quiet in meetings, in negotiations, in arguments, people fill the silence with their own assumptions. They reveal their priorities. They reveal their weaknesses. They reveal their plans. By staying silent, You force others to give away information. That is leverage. That is influence. That is mastery. Silence also builds presence. Have you noticed how calm, quiet people naturally attract attention? It's not their voice. It's not their charisma. It's their controlled energy. People listen more closely because silence signals authority. Most importantly, silence gives you freedom. Freedom to think. Freedom to choose. Freedom to act without emotional interference. Let's tie this back to your emotions. Emotions scream for expression. Fear wants explanation. Anger demands release. Ego insists on reaction. You have a choice. Choose silence. Pause before responding. Observe. Let emotions exist without letting them dictate action. This is emotional control in practice. Average people vent. Elite minds observe. Average people react immediately. Elite minds pause and speak with precision. Average people weaken themselves by constant talking. Elite minds grow stronger by conserving energy and words. Repetition is crucial here. Silence is not weakness. Silence is a weapon. Silence is discipline. Here's a real-world example. A leader in a crisis meeting receives criticism from the board. The average manager reacts defensively. They explain. They argue. They justify. Chaos spreads. Confidence drops. Stress rises. The elite leader stays silent. They listen. They evaluate. They speak once, deliberately, after processing. Their message lands. Authority is preserved. Strategy is maintained. Control remains intact. That's the power of silence. Silence also reinforces self-reliance. You don't need validation. You don't need agreement. You don't need to explain yourself to feel secure. You have a choice. The moment you learn to use silence, you reclaim your energy. You reclaim your attention. You reclaim your control. And that brings us full circle. This is not about being passive. This is not about hiding. This is about commanding presence without unnecessary words. Average people fill the air with noise. Elite minds fill the room with authority. You have a choice. Silence is a weapon. Silence is discipline. Silence is emotional control made visible. You practiced observation in Chapter 2. Now you practice intentional silence. Master this, and people will follow your lead. Master this, and your reactions no longer rule your life. Master this, and you've unlocked one of the core keys to mental toughness. You've learned why silence is strength. You've learned why words, uncontrolled, are costly. You've learned how to wield stillness as leverage. Now, let's take this power one step further. You mastered the weapon of silence. Next, we turn inward to your internal state. Chapter 4. Your feelings are not instructions. Listen carefully, because this is one of the hardest lessons most people ever learn. Your feelings are not instructions. They are signals. That's it. That's all. Most people confuse the two. They feel something and think, I must act on it. Anger arises, and they lash out. Fear appears, and they freeze. Frustration hits, and they complain. That's weakness disguised as honesty. It feels natural. It feels justified. But that's precisely why it keeps you average. You have a choice. Every emotion you feel does not require a response. Every impulse you sense does not require action. Every thought that screams do something can be observed and ignored. That's the key. Think about the last time you acted on emotion. What happened? Did it solve the problem? Or did it escalate the issue? Did it cost you energy, clarity, respect? That's what most people don't see. Emotions are not a GPS for life. They are alerts, signals, warnings, data. You have a choice. Anger does not mean attack. Fear does not mean retreat. Frustration does not mean exploding. You get to choose. High performers do not let their feelings dictate behavior. They feel. They register. They decide consciously. That pause, that gap between feeling and acting, is where power lives. It's not about suppression. It's not about pretending you don't feel. It's about discipline. It's about control. It's about turning raw emotion into calculated action. That's the repetition you need to hear. Feel, don't obey. Observe, don't act. Pause, don't react. Let's get practical. When frustration rises, do not act immediately. When desire sparks, do not chase immediately. When fear creeps in, do not avoid immediately. Pause. Label the emotion. Name it. Understand it. I feel angry. I feel afraid. I feel frustrated. Now ask, what does this emotion want me to do? Does it serve me? Does it align with my goal? If the answer is no, do not act. That's control. That's elite behavior. That's how you stay above chaos. Here's a real-world example. Imagine a workplace. A client rebukes your work. Average people react immediately. They argue, defend, or vent. Their ego gets bruised. Their anger leaks. They create more problems. Now imagine the elite performer. They feel anger. They notice it. They do not obey it. They ask, what can I control here? What matters most? They respond calmly. They strategize. They move with purpose, not impulse. That's the difference. Your feelings are informational, not operational. They provide insight. They show vulnerability. They signal threat or opportunity. But they are not commands. They are not directions. They are not reasons to act. Average people act on feelings. Elite minds act on strategy. Repetition again. Feelings are data, not directives. Feelings are signals, not instructions. Let's talk about temptation. You want instant gratification. You feel a surge of desire. Most people obey immediately. Buy the item. Send the text. Eat the food. Do the action. Elite people pause. They see the signal. They question it. Will this serve me long term? They wait. They evaluate. They decide consciously. Every small decision becomes practice. Every moment of pause builds mastery. Every time you refuse to obey emotion, your control compounds. Now think about fear. Fear wants avoidance. Fear wants retreat. Fear wants compliance. Average people listen. They obey. They let fear decide. Elite minds feel fear. They label it. They question it. And they act anyway, but with awareness. That's discipline. That's emotional intelligence. That's mental toughness. You have a choice. The more you obey your feelings, the more they control you. The more you pause, observe, and make conscious decisions, the more you control your feelings. That's the key. You don't need anyone's permission to stay in control. You don't need validation to refuse impulse. You don't need the world to act wisely. You only need yourself. Every feeling is a test. Every impulse is a challenge. Every urge is an opportunity to exercise control. Average people fail the test. Elite minds pass consistently. This chapter is your wake-up call. Your feelings are not instructions. You must decide consciously what to obey and what to ignore. Repetition. Feelings are data, not directives. Feelings are signals, not instructions. Feelings are signals, not instructions. Practice this relentlessly. Observe. Label. Pause. Decide. Do not obey. You mastered observation in Chapter 2. You mastered silence in Chapter 3. Now that you have mastered internal discipline, the ability to feel without obeying, this is the foundation for the next level. Next, we move into delayed response, the power of waiting before acting. Chapter 5. Delay is power. Most people think speed is power. They think acting fast makes them decisive. They think immediate response means confidence. That belief keeps them weak. The truth is the opposite. Delay is power. That's the key. Every meaningful advantage in life comes from the ability to wait, to pause, to hold back when everything inside you wants to act. You have a choice. When emotion hits, you can move instantly, or you can delay. And that delay seconds, minutes, hours is where control lives. Average people act fast because they can't tolerate discomfort. They can't sit with uncertainty. They can't hold emotional tension. So they act. They send the message. They make the purchase. They say the words. Relief comes for a moment. Then regret. High performers delay. Not because they're unsure, but because they're disciplined. They understand something simple. Time filters emotion. Emotion is loud at first. Then it fades. Clarity arrives later. That's why delay is power. Think about every bad decision you've made. It wasn't because you waited too long. It was because you didn't wait at all. You reacted. You rushed. You obeyed the urge. Reaction equals loss. Delay equals leverage. Say it again. Reaction equals loss. Delay equals leverage. You have a choice. Delay gives you 3 advantages most people never access. First, delay separates emotion from decision. When you wait, emotion loses intensity. What felt urgent becomes manageable. What felt personal becomes neutral. Second, delay reveals consequences. When you slow down, you start seeing second-order effects. What happens after this? What does this cost me tomorrow? Average people never ask that question. Third, delay gives you dominance. The person who can wait controls the pace. The pace controls the outcome. That's the key. Look at negotiations. The impatient one talks too much. They reveal their position. They accept bad terms just to end the discomfort. The one who delays wins. They stay quiet. They wait. They let the other side blink first. That's not luck. That's discipline. Now apply this to your emotions. Anger wants immediate release. Delay starves it. Desire wants immediate gratification. Delay weakens it. Fear wants immediate escape. Delay exposes it. Delay turns raw emotion into information. You have a choice. Most people think delay is weakness because they're afraid of losing opportunities. But the truth is brutal. Most opportunities you rush into are traps. High performers don't rush. They filter. They understand this rule. If it requires an emotional decision, it requires a delay. That's the standard. Let's make this practical. The next time you feel any urge, do nothing for 10 minutes. No action. No response. No explanation. Just wait. Observe what happens. The intensity drops. The story in your head changes. You regain control. That's power. You don't need their permission to wait. You don't need to explain your silence. You don't owe anyone immediate access to your decisions. Delay is self-respect in action. Average people are available instantly. Elite minds are selective. That's the difference. Think about communication. Immediate replies signal neediness. Delayed replies signal control. This isn't about manipulation. It's about boundaries. You respond when you decide, not when emotion demands it. That's discipline. Now think about conflict. Someone provokes you. Your ego wants to strike back. Delay disarms ego. You wait. You don't give them the reaction they want. They lose interest. You gain leverage. That's power. Delay also builds mental toughness. Every time you delay gratification, you train your nervous system to tolerate discomfort. You prove to yourself, I don't need to act to survive this feeling. That belief changes everything. You become harder to manipulate, harder to rush, harder to destabilize. That's the key. Here's another hard truth. People who can't delay are predictable. Predictable people are controllable. People who can delay are unpredictable. Unpredictable people are respected. You have a choice. Most people let emotions set their schedule. They act when they feel like it. They stop when they don't. Elite minds flip the rule. They act on principles. They move on to discipline. They wait strategically. Delay is not inaction. Delay is preparation. It's choosing the right moment instead of the fast one. Now let's connect this to the bigger picture of your life. Impulse spending. Impulse eating. Impulse talking. Impulse reacting. All signs of one thing: lack of delay. You don't fix these with motivation. You fix them with discipline. It's not about willpower. It's about systems. Create forced delays. Rules like, I don't respond to emotional messages the same day. I wait 24 hours before major decisions. I pause before I speak when triggered. These rules remove negotiation. And when negotiation ends, discipline begins. That's the key. Delay builds identity. Each time you wait, you reinforce the identity of someone in control. Each time you rush, you reinforce the identity of someone reactive. Identity compounds. Choose wisely. You don't need their permission to slow down. You don't need validation to wait. You don't need to explain your pace. You have a choice. Let's repeat it one more time, because repetition is how this sinks in. Reaction equals loss. Delay equals power. Reaction equals loss. Delay equals power. Live by this, and your entire decision-making process changes. You stop creating problems. You stop escalating the conflict. You stop sabotaging yourself emotionally. And something else happens. You start noticing who else lacks delay. Who rushes. Who panics. Who reacts. And you'll see it clearly. They are always behind. You're no longer playing that game. You've learned to pause. You've learned to observe. You've learned to stay silent. You've learned that feelings are not instructions. And now you've learned that delay is power. This is how emotional control becomes practical. But there's one major weakness left to eliminate. One behavior that silently destroys discipline and gives your power away. You mastered delay. Now it's time to cut the habit that makes people desperate. Chapter 6. Stop seeking validation immediately. This chapter will make some people uncomfortable. Good. Discomfort is where growth starts. Here's the truth, stated clearly and without softness. The moment you seek validation, you give your power away. That's the key. Validation seeking is one of the most expensive habits you can have. It looks harmless. It hides behind just sharing, just explaining, just wanting feedback. But underneath, it's a weakness. You have a choice. Every time you look for approval, agreement, or reassurance, you are outsourcing your self-worth. You are saying without words, tell me who I am. Tell me I'm right. Tell me I'm enough. And the moment you do that, you are no longer in control. High performers do not move like this. They do not ask for permission to trust themselves. They do not need a consensus to act. They do not explain themselves to feel secure. Average people do. That's the difference. Validation feels good in the short term. Someone agrees with you. Someone reassures you. Someone says, you're right. Relief hits. Dopamine spikes. Then what happens? You need it again. Validation is addictive. And like every addiction, the dose increases over time. At first, you just want reassurance. Then you want agreement. Then you want praise. Then you want attention. And slowly, without noticing, you become dependent. That's not emotional intelligence. That's emotional dependency. You have a choice. Let's be very clear. Seeking validation is not the same as seeking wisdom. Elite minds seek information, not approval. They ask questions to improve decisions, not to soothe emotions. Average people ask questions to feel better. Elite people ask questions to get better. That's the key. Look at how validation shows up. You over-explain your decisions. You justify your boundaries. You defend choices you already made. You share plans too early to get reactions. Why? Because part of you is unsure. And instead of sitting with that uncertainty, you try to erase it with approval. That's weakness disguised as communication. You don't need their permission. Repeat it. You don't need their permission. You don't need permission to rest. You don't need permission to say no. You don't need permission to choose a different path. You don't need permission to trust yourself. Every time you explain yourself unnecessarily, you signal doubt. Every time you seek agreement, you lower your authority. That's not arrogance. That's reality. Let's talk about the workplace. An average employee constantly seeks validation. Is this okay? Was this right? I hope this makes sense. They mean well. But what they communicate is insecurity. Now look at the elite performer. They don't seek reassurance. They deliver results. They state decisions calmly. They ask targeted questions only when necessary. Their confidence is quiet. Their authority is felt. That's discipline. Validation seeking also destroys emotional control. Why? Because if other people's opinions matter too much, their reactions control you. Praise lifts you too high. Criticism crushes you too low. You become unstable. One good comment and you're confident. One bad comment and you're spiraling. That's not strength. That's emotional volatility. Elite minds are internally referenced. Their center is inside, not outside. That's the key. Here's a brutal truth. If someone can validate you, they can manipulate you. They can withdraw approval. They can dangle praise. They can control your behavior. That's why emotional control requires independence from validation. You have a choice. Stop asking, do they like me? Do they agree? Do they approve? Start asking, is this aligned with my values? Is this effective? Is this disciplined? That shift changes everything. Now let's talk about social validation. Likes, comments, views, attention. These are tools, not measurements of worth. Average people live and die by feedback. Elite minds use feedback without becoming addicted to it. They don't chase applause. They chase progress. That's the difference. Here's a simple rule you must adopt immediately. If you already know your reason, stop explaining. Explanation after decision is often validation seeking. Clarity before decision is discipline. You don't need to convince everyone. You don't need to be understood by everyone. Misunderstanding is not danger. Dependence is. That's the key. Let's make this practical. The next time you feel the urge to explain yourself, pause. Ask, am I sharing information or seeking reassurance? If it's reassurance, stop. Sit with the discomfort. That discomfort is you reclaiming control. You have a choice. Another rule. Do not announce plans. Execute quietly. Announcing plans invites validation. Execution builds confidence. Talk less. Do more. Silence builds self-trust. Action builds authority. Validation weakens both. This doesn't mean you become cold or isolated. It means you become self-contained. You process internally. You decide deliberately. You act without noise. Elite minds don't need applause to move forward. They move because it's right. They move because it's disciplined. They move because they decided. That's the key. Repetition matters here, so hear it again. You don't need their permission. You don't need their approval. You don't need their validation. You need control. Validation seeking is emotional outsourcing. Emotional control requires emotional ownership. Own your decisions. Own your silence. Own your direction. When you stop seeking validation, something powerful happens. Your emotions stabilize. Your confidence becomes quieter but stronger. Your actions become cleaner. And people notice. Not because you ask them to, but because independence is visible. You mastered delay. You learned to wait instead of react. Now you've learned to stand without applause. This is real discipline. But there's another layer. A deeper one. What happens when no one is watching? when there is no feedback at all. That's where true strength is built. You stopped seeking validation. Now it's time to build power in complete silence. Chapter 7. Build mental toughness when no one is watching. Here is where most people fail. Not in public. Not under pressure. But in private. When no one is watching. When no one is praising. When no one is correcting. That's where mental toughness is either built or exposed. That's the key. Anyone can perform when eyes are on them. Anyone can act disciplined when there's accountability. But real strength, elite strength, is forged in silence. You have a choice. What you do when no one is watching defines who you are. Not your intentions. Not your words. Not your explanations. Your private behavior is your true identity. Most people are disciplined only when they are being observed. They work harder when supervised. They behave better when judged. They stay focused when praised. Take the audience away, and everything collapses. That's a weakness. Mental toughness means you hold the standard even in isolation. Especially in isolation. That's discipline. It's not about motivation. It's not about inspiration. It's about non-negotiables. Elite minds do not rely on feeling ready. They rely on structure. They do the work when it's boring. They stick to the plan when it's quiet. They follow through when there's no reward. That's the key. Let's be honest. When no one is watching, excuses multiply. I'll do it later. No one will know. It doesn't matter this time. That voice is the enemy. Every time you listen to it, you weaken yourself. Every time you ignore it, you build toughness. You have a choice. Mental toughness is not built in dramatic moments. It's built in boring ones. Waking up on time when you could sleep in. Sticking to the plan when skipping would be easier. Choosing discipline when comfort is available. These moments look insignificant. They are not. They compound. Most people think toughness is about enduring pain. It's not. It's about consistency without stimulation. Doing what needs to be done without applause. Without pressure. Without immediate payoff. That's elite behavior. Let's talk about the internal conversation. When no one is watching, the voice in your head gets louder. It negotiates. It rationalizes. It bargains. Just this once. You deserve a break. It won't matter. That voice is not you. It's an impulse. An impulse is an undisciplined emotion trying to regain control. You have a choice. You either negotiate with impulse, or you shut it down with rules. Elite minds don't debate themselves endlessly. They decide in advance. Rules eliminate negotiation. And when negotiation ends, discipline begins. That's the key. Examples of rules. I train even when I don't feel like it. I don't check distractions during focused work. I finish what I start, especially when it's uncomfortable. These rules are private. No one sees them. No one rewards them. That's why they matter. Mental toughness is built when you do the right thing without witnesses. Most people rely on external pressure. Deadlines. Supervisors. Social expectations. Elite minds build internal pressure. They don't ask, will anyone notice? They ask, did I keep my word to myself? That's the difference. Break promises to others, and you feel guilt. Break promises to yourself repeatedly, and you lose self-respect. And self-respect is the foundation of emotional control. That's the key. You can't control your emotions if you don't trust yourself. And you don't trust yourself if your private actions are inconsistent. Mental toughness restores self-trust. Each time you do what you said you would alone, you send a signal, I can rely on myself. That changes everything. You become calmer, more grounded, less reactive. Because you're no longer compensating for internal weakness. You have a choice. Let's talk about discomfort. When no one is watching, discomfort feels louder. There's no distraction, no validation, no reward. That's why most people avoid it. Elite minds lean into it. Not dramatically. Quietly. They sit with boredom. They tolerate effort. They resist escape. This trains the nervous system. It teaches your body, I can handle this without reacting. That's mental toughness. And mental toughness makes emotional control automatic. Here's a truth you need to hear repeatedly. If you only act disciplined when motivated, you are not disciplined. Motivation is emotional. Discipline is structural. You don't wait to feel ready. You execute because it's scheduled. That's the key. Let's make this practical. Create one daily non-negotiable. One small action you do every day no matter what. No audience. No posting. No talking about it. Just execution. It could be 10 minutes of focused work. A short workout. Quiet reflection. Skill practice. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that you do it even when no one knows. Especially when no one knows. That act trains toughness. Another rule. Do not reward yourself with distraction for avoiding discomfort. Scrolling. Snacking. Escaping. These behaviors undo toughness. Instead, reward completion, not comfort. Completion builds identity. Comfort erodes it. You have a choice. Most people try to look disciplined. Elite minds focus on being disciplined. Appearances don't matter. Consistency does. When no one is watching, you are either reinforcing weakness or forging strength. There is no neutral. That's the key. Mental toughness built in private shows up everywhere. In pressure. In conflict. In uncertainty. Because when chaos arrives, you don't panic. You've already trained discomfort. You don't react emotionally. You've already practiced restraint. You don't seek validation. You've already learned to stand alone. That's power. You don't need their permission to be disciplined. You don't need recognition to be consistent. You don't need applause to build strength. You have a choice. This chapter taught you where real toughness is built. Not in moments of attention, but in moments of silence. You learn to keep standards without supervision. To execute without reward. To hold the line when it would be easy to bend. That's elite behavior. But now we go deeper. Because even with toughness, there is one thing that can still destabilize you if left unchecked. Your internal baseline. You built strength in private. Now it's time to stabilize your internal state permanently. Chapter 8. Pressure reveals, not creates. Pressure does not make you someone new. Pressure exposes who you already are. That's the truth most people avoid. They say, I'm not like this usually. They say I was under stress. They say, that's not the real me. Wrong. Pressure doesn't create behavior. Pressure removes the mask. You have a choice. You can keep lying to yourself. Or you can use pressure as a mirror. That's the key. When pressure hits, the untrained mind panics. It vents. It reacts. It collapses inward or explodes outward. But the elite mind understands something different. Pressure is information. Pressure is feedback. Pressure is exposure. It shows you exactly where your discipline is weak, and exactly where it is strong. Most people train only when life is calm. They feel disciplined when nothing challenges them. They feel confident when nothing is at stake. That discipline is fake. Real discipline survives pressure. Absolute emotional control shows up when things go wrong, not when things go right. You don't rise to the occasion. You fall to your level of training. That's the rule. So when pressure reveals impatience, that impatience was already there. When pressure reveals anger, that anger was already there. When pressure reveals fear, that fear was already there. Pressure didn't put it inside you. Pressure removed the cover. You have a choice. Blame the situation. Or fix the weakness. That's the key. Look at the real world. Two people face the same deadline. Same pressure. Same stakes. One panics. Complains. Snaps at others. Rushes decisions. makes mistakes. The other slows down, becomes quieter, more precise, more deliberate. Same pressure, different inner structure. That's not talent. That's conditioning. High performers train themselves to expect pressure. Average people hope pressure doesn't come. Hope is not a strategy. Discipline is. It's not about avoiding pressure. It's about becoming someone pressure can't break. Pressure reveals your emotional reflexes. Do you defend yourself immediately? Do you explain yourself compulsively? Do you seek reassurance? Do you react just to relieve discomfort? Those are tells. Those are leaks. Elite minds seal leaks. They don't rush to be understood. They don't rush to be validated. They don't rush to respond. They observe. You don't need their permission. You don't need their approval. You don't need to win the moment. You need to win the pattern. That's the key. Pressure also reveals your relationship with silence. When pressure rises, most people fill the space. They talk too much. They over-explain. They justify. Silence feels dangerous to them, because silence forces self-control. But silence is stability. Under pressure, silence says, I am not rushed. I am not shaken. I am not controlled by this moment. That message is felt before it is understood. It's not about intimidation. It's about containment. You contain yourself, so the situation cannot contain you. Pressure reveals how much emotional debt you carry. If small stress creates a big reaction, you are already overloaded. Elite discipline is about daily unloading, processing emotions privately, thinking clearly before speaking, training restraint before it's needed. That way, when pressure arrives, there's nothing explosive waiting to come out. That's the difference. You don't become calm under pressure by luck. You earn it through repetition. Calm is trained. Control is trained. Silence is trained. Here's the practical instruction. Next time pressure hits, do nothing at first. No message. No reply. No decision. Pause. Name what you feel internally. Don't express it. Observe it. You have a choice. Act from emotion, or act from discipline. That pause is power. Even 5 seconds changes everything. Even one breath creates distance. Distance creates control. That's the key. Stop judging yourself when pressure reveals weakness. That's information, not failure. Pressure just showed you what to train next. If you get defensive, train restraint. If you rush, train patience. If you vent, train silence. Pressure is your coach if you let it be. Average people curse pressure. Elite people study it. They ask, what did this moment expose? Where did I lose control? What needs tightening? That's how growth actually happens. Not through motivation. Through correction. Pressure also reveals who leads and who reacts. Leaders slow the room down. Reactors speed the chaos up. When a leader speaks under pressure, people feel grounded. When a reactive person speaks under pressure, people feel tense. That's emotional contagion. And it starts with you. You don't need a title to lead. You need regulation. You don't need authority. You need composure. That's real power. Understand this clearly. If pressure breaks you, life will keep applying pressure. If pressure sharpens you, life starts trusting you with more. More responsibility. More influence. More opportunity. Life rewards what can hold weight. So stop asking for less pressure. Start becoming heavier. Pressure reveals. It doesn't create. And now you know the truth. You don't rise in challenging moments. You show what you trained in quiet ones. That's why discipline must exist before the test. You have a choice. Use pressure as proof of weakness, or use it as a blueprint for strength. That's the key. You've learned to observe. You've learned to delay. You've learned to stay silent. Now it's time to harden that discipline into something unshakable. You faced pressure. Next, we build endurance. Chapter 9. Discipline is built in boring moments. Most people misunderstand discipline. They think discipline is heroic. They think it's dramatic. They think it shows up only in a crisis. It doesn't. Discipline is boring, quiet, repetitive. And that's why most people never build it. You have a choice. You can chase intensity, or you can master consistency. That's the key. Dull moments are where your future is decided. Not during breakthroughs. Not under pressure. Not during motivation spikes. But during ordinary days. Unremarkable hours. Moments when no one is watching and nothing is exciting. That's where discipline is either built or abandoned. Average people need emotion to act. Elite minds act without emotion. It's not about motivation. It's about standards. Look at how most people live. They wait to feel ready. They wait to feel confident. They wait to feel inspired. And while they wait, nothing changes. Discipline doesn't ask how you feel. Discipline asks what needs to be done. You don't need their permission. You don't need encouragement. You don't need an audience. You need repetition. That's the key. Boring moments test who you really are. Will you do the work when it's dull? Will you control yourself when nothing is forcing you to? Will you stay consistent when results are invisible? Most people quit here. Not because it's hard, but because it's quiet. Silence exposes intention. When no one is clapping, no one is watching, no one is praising. Who are you then? That answer determines everything. Discipline is built through micro-decisions. Small choices. Tiny restraints. Daily structure. Not reacting when you could. Not speaking when you want to. Not consuming when you're bored. Boredom is dangerous to the undisciplined mind. It looks for stimulation. Drama. Noise. Elite minds use boredom as training. They stay still. They stay focused. They stay controlled. That's how they win long-term. Here's a truth most people don't like. If you can't control yourself when nothing is happening, you won't control yourself when everything is happening. Pressure doesn't create discipline. It exposes the lack of it. That's why dull moments matter. They are practice reps for life. You don't need chaos to train. You need structure. Think about this. Waking up on time. Doing the task you planned. Finishing what you started. Saying no to distractions. None of that is exciting. None of it feels powerful in the moment. But stacked over time, it builds something unstoppable. Discipline compounds. That's the difference between average and elite. Average seeks intensity. Elite seeks alignment. Alignment between intention and action. You have a choice. Scroll. Or think. React. Or observe. Quit early. Or finish quietly. No one will celebrate these moments. No one will reward you immediately. But your future self will. That's the key. Most people waste dull moments escaping themselves. They fill silence with noise. They fill emptiness with consumption. They fill discomfort with distraction. Elite minds sit in boredom without flinching. Because boredom strengthens restraint. If you can sit without stimulation, you can sit without reacting. And if you can do that, you can control your life. Discipline is also built by keeping promises to yourself. Small promises. Daily promises. When you break them, you undermine internal trust. When you keep them, you build authority internally. Self-respect doesn't come from confidence. It comes from follow-through. Say less. Do more. That's the rule. Here's the practical instruction. Choose one boring habit. 1. At the same time. Same place. Every day. No emotion attached. No debate. No flexibility. When the mind resists, do it anyway. You have a choice. Listen to resistance. Or train dominance over it. That's the key. Discipline doesn't need excitement. It needs identity. You don't try to be disciplined. You become someone who follows rules. Your rules. And dull moments are where that identity is reinforced. Every time you act without drama, you strengthen that identity. Understand this. The world is loud. Your power grows in quiet. The world is chaotic. Your edge grows in routine. The world rewards visible effort. Life rewards invisible discipline. That's why most people never separate themselves. They refuse the boring path. Dull moments are not empty. They are loaded. Loaded with potential. Loaded with proof. Loaded with momentum. And every time you show up anyway, you quietly pull ahead. No announcement. No applause. Just results. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to feel inspired. You need to be reliable. Reliable to yourself. Reliable in silence. Reliable when nothing is happening. That's discipline. You've learned to control reactions. You've learned to delay. You've learned to observe pressure. Now you understand where discipline is actually built. Not in extremes. In the ordinary. You have a choice. Waste boring moments. Or weaponize them. That's the key. And now, we move to the final truth. The principle that ties everything together. You've built control. You've built toughness. Now you must protect it. Chapter 10. Guard your inner world ruthlessly. Everything you've learned in this audiobook leads here. This is the final line of defense. The final discipline. The final separation between average and elite. Your inner world decides your outer results. And if you don't guard it ruthlessly, the world will invade it without permission. You have a choice. Protect your mind. Or let everything contaminate it. That's the key. Most people live mentally exposed. They let opinions walk in freely. They let noise settle inside them. They let other people's moods become their own. They call it being open-minded. In reality, it's being undefended. An undefended mind is a manipulated mind. Elite minds are not open. They are selective. They choose what enters. They choose what stays. They choose what is ignored. You don't need their permission. You don't need their agreement. You don't need to absorb their chaos. Your inner world is where decisions are made. If it's cluttered, decisions are weak. If it's noisy, decisions are rushed. If it's emotional, decisions are reactive. That's why guarding your inner world is not optional. It's survival. Every emotion you allow unchecked becomes a directive. Every thought you don't challenge becomes a belief. Every distraction you tolerate becomes a habit. You have a choice. Allow intrusion. Or enforce boundaries. That's the key. Understand this clearly. Not everything deserves access to you. Not every message needs a response. Not every opinion needs consideration. Not every emotion needs expression. Elite discipline is subtraction. Removing noise. Removing influence. Removing unnecessary input. It's not about being cold. It's about being clear. Look at how most people start their day. They wake up and immediately consume news, messages, social feeds. They let the world program their emotional state before they've even chosen their direction. That's a weakness. Elite minds decide first. Then they engage. They protect the morning. They protect the mind. They protect the tone of the day. Because once the inner world is set, the outer world has less power. Guarding your inner world also means controlling who you keep close. Energy transfers. Mindsets spread. Complaints are contagious. If you surround yourself with undisciplined minds, you will fight unnecessary battles internally. You don't need to cut everyone off. But you must limit access. Some people get conversation. Some get distance. Some get silence. That's not arrogance. That's self-respect. Your inner dialogue matters more than any external voice. What you repeat internally becomes law. If your inner world is full of self-criticism, hesitation, and doubt, you will sabotage yourself quietly. Elite minds speak differently inside. Short, clear, directive. No reaction. Stay calm. Wait. Execute. That internal language is trained. You have a choice. Let the mind ramble. Or command it. That's the key. Guarding your inner world means mastering emotional hygiene. You don't let frustration pile up. You don't let resentment accumulate. You don't let anger leak everywhere. You process privately. You reflect silently. You correct internally. Elite control is invisible. No outbursts. No venting. No emotional dumping. Not because you suppress, but because you regulate. Here's the practical instruction. Audit your inputs. What you watch. What you listen to. Who you engage with. What do you think about repeatedly? Remove what agitates you. Limit what distracts you. Strengthen what stabilizes you. This isn't comfort. This is control. You have a choice. Consume randomly. Or consume intentionally. That's the key. Guarding your inner world also means embracing silence. Silence resets the nervous system. Silence sharpens awareness. Silence restores authority. Most people are afraid of silence because it forces them to confront themselves. Elite minds welcome it. Silence is where clarity lives. And clarity is power. Do not confuse guarding your inner world with isolation. You can be present without being permeable. You can listen without absorbing. You can engage without reacting. That's mastery. You decide what matters. You decide what passes through. Nothing else gets access. Remember this. If someone can trigger you easily, they can control you easily. If a comment can derail your focus was fragile. If pressure can hijack your emotions, your inner world was unguarded. That's not an insult. That's feedback. And now you know what to fix. This is the final discipline. Control your reactions. Delay your responses. Choose silence. Train in boredom. Study pressure. And then protect it all. Because discipline, once built, must be defended. You have a choice. Live mentally exposed. Or live mentally fortified. That's the key. This audiobook was never about motivation. It was about structure, control, authority over yourself. You don't need confidence. You need command. And command starts inside. Guard your inner world ruthlessly. Because when the inside is solid, nothing outside can shake you. That's the standard. And now it's yours to live. You now understand the truth most people avoid. Emotional control is not optional. Every time you react, you give power away. Every time you stay calm, you take it back. This audiobook wasn't meant to entertain you. It was meant to train you. The world is loud. People are emotional. Chaos is everywhere. Your job is simple. Stay calm. Stay disciplined. Stay in control. Now here's the challenge. For the next 30 days, don't react emotionally to anything. Pause. Observe. Decide. Master this, and you will never be average again.